No one chose the disabled alien girl, until a human asked, "Will you be my partner?" Zara sat quietly in the corner of the busy market, her eyes scanning the bustling crowd of various alien species. The marketplace on the planet Xanthias was always full of life. Different beings from across the galaxy walked by in their strange and colorful clothes, their voices blending together in a chaotic hum. There were towering giants from Xandora with shimmering blue skin, swift humanoids from Paratha with golden eyes, and the tall, slender reptilians of Grethar, each one moving with grace. Zara, however, wasn't like them. She was shorter than most, her skin a pale shade of purple, and her legs, well, they didn't quite work the way they were supposed to. Zara had been born with a physical disability that made walking impossible without assistance. While others in her species moved with fluidity and grace, Zara had to rely on a simple hoverchair to get around. It wasn't something that bothered her, at least not at first. But on Xanthias, a planet that prided itself on strength, speed, and beauty, it was hard not to feel out of place. She watched as other beings found partners, laughing together, making deals, exchanging gifts. Zara had never been part of those groups. No one ever chose her. She wasn't strong or fast like the others. She wasn't graceful. And though Zara's mind was sharp, no one cared much for what was inside her head. People around her often ignored her, glancing past her as though she wasn't there. Her hoverchair sat quietly as she observed. Zara used to dream about the day she would find someone who would look past her disability, someone who would see her for who she truly was. But that day never came. She had learned to accept that maybe she wasn't meant to be seen. She didn't mind it as much now. Life on Xanthias went on, and so did she. As Zara turned her gaze back to the crowd, her eyes locked on a human. He was standing just a few feet away, looking slightly lost. His clothes were simple, practical, a pale green tunic, boots, and a worn-out pack on his back. He wasn't tall like the other aliens, nor was he particularly remarkable in appearance. But something about his presence seemed different. His eyes were calm, kind, as though they didn't care much for the chaos around him. Zara had seen humans before. They had recently started visiting Xanthias as part of a peaceful exploration program. But humans weren't quite like the other species Zara was used to. They didn't have the same kind of strength, speed, or physical power that many other species admired. Instead, their strength came from their intelligence and adaptability. Zara knew that in the galaxy, humans were seen as newcomers, still proving themselves. The human's eyes met hers. For a brief moment, Zara froze. Most people would glance at her and then look away quickly, as though ashamed for even acknowledging her existence. But not this human. He didn't seem to mind the hover chair or the fact that she wasn't standing like the others. His gaze was steady, curious. Zara quickly looked down, avoiding his eyes, feeling the familiar sting of self-doubt. Why was he looking at her? But then, to her surprise, he spoke. "Excuse me," the human said, his voice gentle. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I'm new here." "Could you tell me what this place is?" Zara blinked, confused. She looked up at him again, unsure of why he was speaking to her. "This is the marketplace," she said softly, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. "It's where many species from across the galaxy come to trade and sell goods." The human smiled, his face lighting up with a kind expression that made Zara feel slightly better. "I see. I'm Marcus," he said, extending his hand in greeting. Zara hesitated for a moment before she reached out, carefully shaking his hand. "Zara," she replied, unsure of what else to say. "You're from here?" Marcus asked, his eyes filled with genuine curiosity. Zara nodded. "Yes," she said. "I've lived here for most of my life." "Wow, that's amazing. I've only just arrived, and I've never seen a place like this before." Marcus paused and then asked, "Do you live nearby? Maybe you could show me around?" Zara's heart skipped a beat. Show him around. She wasn't used to being asked such things. People didn't usually care about her life or experiences. She was always the one watching from the sidelines, but something about Marcus was different. He wasn't looking at her with pity or dismissiveness. His question seemed genuine. Zara started, then stopped herself. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had never been in a situation like this before, where someone was showing interest in her, not because of her disability, but simply as a person. "I could show you the Central Plaza," she said, finally managing to smile. "But I'm not sure how much of a guide I'd be," Marcus smiled back. "That's perfect. I'm sure you know more than I do." He seemed so at ease, so comfortable with her, that for a moment Zara forgot about her chair and her disability. She began to feel like maybe, just maybe, she could enjoy this. The two of them slowly made their way through the busy marketplace, Marcus listening intently as Zara pointed out various goods and explained the different species that frequented the area. They passed a stall selling fruits from a faraway planet, another offering exquisite fabrics, and one with tiny machines that created beautiful holographic art. Zara explained the significance of the art and how it was made using rare materials, and Marcus nodded, genuinely interested. As they walked, Zara noticed that people were staring at them. Some faces were curious, others judgmental, and a few, Zara could swear, were filled with pity. She had become so accustomed to these looks that she had learned to ignore them. But with Marcus by her side, they felt less noticeable, less like an outcast. At one point, they stopped near a fountain in the center of the plaza. Marcus glanced at Zara, a slight frown crossing his face. "I've never met someone like you," he said. "You're smart, you're kind, and you seem like you know this place better than anyone else. I was hoping we could grab a drink together. Maybe you could tell me more about your life here." Zara's heart raced. No one had ever asked her to sit down for a drink before, especially not someone who seemed so well-liked and important. The question, though simple, felt heavy in the air. Zara couldn't remember the last time she had been invited into someone's world, rather than left alone in hers. "I don't know if that's a good idea," Zara said quietly, looking down at the ground. "People usually don't pay much attention to me. I'm not exactly the kind of person others want to be seen with." Marcus didn't seem to mind. "I don't care what other people think," he said with a grin. "I'm asking because I want to get to know you." Zara blinked. It wasn't a typical response, not by the standards of anyone she knew. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe this human saw something in her that no one else did. Maybe, for once, she wasn't invisible. "All right," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll have a drink with you." And so, for the first time in what felt like forever, Zara allowed herself to be seen. Marcus and Zara walked toward the small outdoor cafe by the fountain. The area was quiet, with only a few people scattered around, sipping drinks and talking in low voices. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over the scene. Zara felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't focused on how different she looked or how others saw her. She was simply enjoying the moment, enjoying Marcus's company. When they reached the cafe, Zara carefully sat down in one of the chairs, making sure her hover chair was in place. Marcus sat across from her, his posture relaxed. He smiled at her as though nothing was out of the ordinary. Zara couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. She had grown so used to being overlooked, to being treated like an outsider. It was hard to adjust to someone looking at her with genuine interest, as though she was just another person. "I'm glad you agreed to join me," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "It's nice to finally have someone to talk to. Most of the people I meet here seem so busy, so focused on their own worlds." Zara nodded slowly. She had noticed that too. Xanthias was a vibrant planet, but it was also a place where people seemed to be constantly moving, constantly looking for something or someone else. It wasn't easy to stand out when everyone else was chasing their own goals. "I guess that's how things are here," Zara said softly. "People are always rushing around trying to get ahead. It's easy to forget that there are others who might not have the same opportunities." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Zara looked down at her hands, feeling a sense of vulnerability creeping in. It wasn't easy to talk about the way people treated her because of her disability. She had spent so many years hiding her feelings, pretending she didn't care about being ignored. But now, with Marcus, it felt different. He wasn't looking at her with pity or judgment. He was looking at her like she mattered. "I'm not like everyone else here," Zara said quietly. "I don't fit in with the others. They're strong and fast, and they have no problem finding someone to be with. But she stopped herself, unsure of how to continue. "I'm different. I don't walk like they do. I don't have the same kind of abilities, and because of that, I'm usually left out." "People don't want someone like me?" Marcus didn't say anything for a moment. He just sat there, his eyes focused on Zara, listening. It made Zara feel exposed, but in a way that was oddly comforting. She wasn't used to being listened to in such a calm, understanding way. "I see," Marcus said finally, "but that's not how I see you." Zara looked up at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't care about your disability," Marcus said. I see you as someone who's smart, kind, and capable. You know things about this place that I would never have learned if I hadn't met you. You've already shown me more about this world than I could have learned on my own." Zara blinked, feeling a lump form in her throat. She wasn't sure what to say. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. It was strange, almost unreal. How could someone like Marcus look past her disability and see her for who she really was? "Thank you," Zara whispered, her voice shaking a little. She quickly looked away, embarrassed by the emotion that was rising inside her. Marcus smiled warmly. "There's no need to thank me. I'm just being honest." He paused, then added, "I've met a lot of people in my life, but you're the first person who's made me stop and think. You're not what I expected, and that's a good thing." Zara felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her was afraid of what might happen next, afraid of getting her hopes up. She had been let down so many times before. But another part of her, the part that had been buried for so long, felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was someone who could see her for who she truly was. The waiter came over and took their orders. Zara ordered a simple drink, something cold and refreshing, while Marcus ordered a local specialty. The waiter left them alone again, and the two of them sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "So, Marcus," Zara began, her curiosity getting the better of her. "What brought you to Xanthias? I know humans have only recently started exploring the galaxy. What's your mission here?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. "Well, it's not so much a mission, really," he said. "I'm here as part of a cultural exchange program. I'm supposed to learn about different species, their ways of life, and share what I know about humans. It's all about building relationships between different races and creating a better understanding of each other." Zara nodded, impressed. She had heard of the human exploration program, but she hadn't met many humans in person. The few she had encountered were either too busy or too focused on their own agendas to really care about the people they were meeting. Marcus was different. He seemed genuinely interested in learning and connecting. "That sounds like an important job," Zara said. "It is," Marcus agreed. "But honestly, it's a lot harder than I thought. People here are so different from what I'm used to, and sometimes it feels like no one really wants to connect. They're all too busy with their own lives, too focused on getting ahead." Zara nodded in understanding. She had always felt that way. People were always so focused on what they could gain, what they could achieve. No one ever stopped to look at what they already had. "It's hard, isn't it?" Zara said quietly. "Trying to fit into a world that doesn't see you. Trying to be a part of something when no one even notices you're there." Marcus looked at her with a soft expression. "I know what you mean, but I think we're all just trying to figure things out. Everyone has their own struggles, their own challenges. But that doesn't mean we can't make connections, even if it's not the way we expected." Zara thought about that for a moment. It was true. She had always thought that her disability would be the thing that kept her from connecting with others, but maybe that wasn't true. Maybe there were people who could see past it, people who could understand her for who she was, not just what she couldn't do. The waiter returned with their drinks, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They talked about the different species Zara had encountered in her life, the foods she liked, and the strange customs she had learned about. Marcus was eager to know more, and Zara was happy to share. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like she was part of something. As the evening wore on and the sun set, casting long shadows across the plaza, Zara couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth. She was sitting there, talking to a human, someone who didn't care about her disability, someone who saw her as an equal. It was a small step, but it felt like the beginning of something new, something that might just change her life forever. When they finished their drinks, Marcus stood up and offered his hand to Zara. "I had a great time," he said. "Thank you for showing me around. I hope we can do this again sometime." Zara looked up at him, her heart racing. She had always kept to herself, never expecting anyone to ask her to spend time with them. But here Marcus was, offering her something she had never thought she would have, friendship, maybe even more. "I'd like that," Zara said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of her disability lighten, if only for a moment. The days that followed were full of small moments of connection between Zara and Marcus. After their first meeting at the cafe, they continued to spend more time together. At first, it was just casual conversations, but as time passed, Zara found herself looking forward to their meetings more and more. Marcus had this way of making her feel seen in a way she wasn't used to. He didn't just look at her disability, he saw her, the real Zara. It was something she had longed for but never thought she'd receive. Zara showed Marcus around Xanthias, taking him to places she knew well, though she often took the path less traveled. She wanted to share parts of her world with him that few others had bothered to see. There was a quiet park, hidden behind a cluster of tall, strange trees that glowed in the dark. She brought him there one evening, and as they sat together under the soft, glowing canopy of leaves, Marcus leaned back and asked, "Zara, tell me about your life here. What's it like to live on this planet?" Zara paused for a moment, thinking about the question. The truth was, she had never really thought about her life on Xanthias in detail. It was just the way things were, and she had accepted it, but now that Marcus was asking, it felt important to answer. She began to speak slowly, her words coming carefully. Xanthias is a beautiful planet, but it's also a place that focuses a lot on power, strength, beauty. Those are things that are valued more than anything else, she said, her voice soft. My people were known for our grace and speed. We're designed to move swiftly, to perform physically. But I'm not like them. My body doesn't work the way it's supposed to. I can't run, I can't stand on my own without help, and because of that, I've always been different. Marcus listened intently, his eyes focused on her as if he understood every word she said. There was no judgment, just quiet understanding. Zara continued, "Growing up, I learned to keep to myself. I didn't want to be a burden and I didn't want to stand out. But people don't always see the quiet ones, the ones who don't fit in. I learned how to hide in plain sight." There was a long pause before Marcus spoke again. "I don't think you're a burden," he said, his voice steady. "You've taught me so much already, and I've only just met you. What you've gone through, what you've had to learn, it makes you strong in ways that others can't understand." Zara felt a warmth spread in her chest, and she couldn't help but smile. It was the first time anyone had said something like that to her. She had never thought of herself as strong, just different, weaker than the others. But hearing Marcus say it made her feel like maybe she wasn't as broken as she thought. The next few days were filled with more of the same. Marcus asked Zara about her favorite places on Xanthias, her favorite foods, and the little things that made her feel at home. Zara, in turn, asked about Earth, about the human world which was still so foreign to her. Marcus shared stories about his life back home, about the cities, the forests, and the strange animals that lived on Earth. Zara listened with wide eyes, fascinated by everything he told her. But as their friendship grew, so did the whispers around them. Zara noticed it more and more. She wasn't blind to the way people looked at her and Marcus. Whenever they walked through the market, people would stare, their gazes lingering just a little too long. Some would even point and whisper to each other. Zara had gotten used to being invisible, but now it felt like she was a spectacle, something to be gawked at. She hated it, but there was nothing she could do about it. She tried to ignore the stares, tried to focus on Marcus, but it was hard. One afternoon, as they walked through the bustling central plaza, Zara's heart sank as she overheard a conversation between two people standing near a stall. The words were soft, but they were loud enough for her to hear. "I heard that Human is spending time with that alien girl," one of them whispered. "You know, the one who can't even walk," the other one laughed. "Yeah, what's he thinking? She's not like the others. She's weak." Zara's breath caught in her throat. She had heard things like this before, but hearing it in front of Marcus made it worse. She could feel her face turning red with shame, but when she glanced at Marcus, he didn't seem upset. He didn't seem bothered at all. Instead, he just kept walking beside her, his gaze forward as though nothing had been said. She couldn't understand it. Why didn't he care about what people were saying? Why wasn't he bothered by the fact that he was being seen with someone like her? She wanted to ask him, but she didn't. She didn't want to sound like she was questioning his intentions. "Marcus," Zara finally said, her voice quieter than usual. "Do you ever wonder what people think of us?" Marcus turned to her, his expression soft. "Honestly," he said with a smile, "I don't care what anyone else thinks. I care about what you think. I care about you." Zara stopped walking, stunned by his words. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't care about the whispers, the looks, or the judgments," Marcus said, taking a step closer to her. "What matters to me is who you are. Not how you look, not what others think of you, but the person I see. You're kind, intelligent, and you've already taught me so much. People don't see that, but I do." Zara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She quickly looked away, embarrassed by the sudden rush of emotion. "I'm not like them," she whispered. I don't belong here. You belong here as much as anyone else, Marcus said firmly, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. You don't have to be like everyone else to belong. You are enough just as you are. For a moment, Zara didn't know what to say. She had never been told that before. No one had ever made her feel like she was enough, just as she was. It was a new feeling, and it made her chest tighten with something between hope and fear. She didn't know if she could believe it, but Marcus's words made her want to try. Over the next few days, Zara felt herself changing. She wasn't sure if it was because of Marcus or something inside herself, but the way she viewed the world started to shift. She was still nervous, still unsure of herself, but the weight of her disability didn't feel as heavy. When she walked through the market with Marcus, she started to hold her head up higher. She didn't care as much about the stairs. She cared more about the fact that Marcus was by her side, that he saw her for who she really was. But even as her confidence grew, the tension between Zara and the rest of the world remained. People continued to look at her and Marcus as though they didn't belong together. Zara couldn't understand why it bothered her so much. She had always been an outsider. She had always known what it was like to feel alone. So why was it different now? One evening, after they had spent the day exploring a beautiful forest just outside the city, Zara and Marcus sat by a small campfire. The flickering flames cast long shadows across their faces, and the air was cool against Zara's skin. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn before Marcus spoke. Zara, he said softly, I know things haven't always been easy for you, but I want you to know something. Zara turned to him, waiting for him to continue. You don't have to carry the weight of the world alone, Marcus said, his voice low and steady. I'm here and I'll always be here for you. Zara felt a warmth spread through her chest, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had always believed. The days grew shorter as the seasons on Xanthias began to shift. Zara and Marcus continued to spend time together, and with each passing day, their connection deepened. They had become more than just casual acquaintances. They had become companions. Marcus was always there, never judging, always seeing Zara for who she truly was. To Zara, it felt like a dream she never thought would come true. But no matter how much Zara tried to focus on their growing friendship, the world around them was not as accepting. There were still whispers, still the stares from strangers, and it was becoming harder for Zara to ignore them. She had grown used to the judgment in her life, but Marcus's presence made it feel even more painful. The fact that he chose to be seen with her only made others' judgment more intense. Zara couldn't help but feel the pressure building around them. One evening, they attended a cultural event that was being held in the grand plaza of the city. It was a celebration, a display of the greatest achievements of Xanthias's most respected citizens. The event was a gathering of dignitaries from different species across the galaxy. The air was electric with excitement, and Zara could feel the weight of the stairs on her as soon as she and Marcus entered the plaza. The moment they walked in, Zara could feel the eyes on them, the sharp glances, the whispers that followed. She could feel herself shrinking under the pressure, wishing she could disappear into the crowd. But Marcus didn't seem to notice. He kept walking, his eyes forward, his posture relaxed, as though he was completely unaware of the tension in the air. Zara felt a pang of discomfort, but she tried to ignore it. She had been in these situations before, used to the silent judgment, the unspoken words. But it was different now. It was different because Marcus was by her side and he wasn't like the others. He wasn't afraid to be seen with her. As the evening wore on, the event began. There were performances, speeches, and displays of talent, showcasing the physical prowess and beauty of the various species. Zara watched from the side, feeling out of place as the others performed feats of strength and agility. But then it was time for the main event, the challenge that would determine the most respected individual of the evening. The challenge was designed to test physical strength and skill, something that Zara knew she would never be able to compete in. She had never been able to keep up with the others in terms of strength or speed, but that wasn't what bothered her the most. What bothered her was the way the crowd's attention shifted when the event was announced. People began to murmur, pointing at her, at Marcus, their whispers sharp and cutting. "She's here with him?" one voice asked, filled with disbelief. "Doesn't he know better?" Zara closed her eyes, trying to block out the noise. She had grown used to this kind of thing, but it still hurt. She didn't want to be a spectacle. She didn't want to be the object of other people's judgment. Marcus, however, didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, but he didn't care. He turned to Zara, his expression calm, his eyes filled with warmth. "You're okay, Zara. Don't let them get to you." Zara smiled weakly, grateful for his words, but the feeling of being an outsider lingered. The challenge began, and she found herself withdrawing into herself, not wanting to be noticed, not wanting to be the center of attention. She kept her eyes on the ground, trying to ignore the murmurs that followed her wherever she went. But as the event continued, something unexpected happened. Zara saw a group of her own people, the beings from her species, approach Marcus. They were tall, confident, and powerful-looking, with the graceful movements that Zara had always admired. They surrounded Marcus, their eyes cold as they looked him up and down. Zara's heart sank. She recognized the faces of these individuals, people she had known her entire life. They were some of the most respected members of her community, the ones who had always followed the rules, always done things the right way. They had never had much to do with her, never cared much about what she had to say. And now they were turning their attention to Marcus. "Human," one of them said, her voice laced with condescension. "You've chosen an interesting companion." Zara could feel the words cutting into her like sharp daggers. She wanted to shrink away, to disappear, but Marcus stood his ground, his eyes unwavering. "I don't see anything wrong with my choice," he said firmly. "Zara is an incredible person. She's been kind enough to show me around this beautiful place, and I'm grateful for it." The alien woman sneered, her eyes glinting with disbelief. "Incredible," she repeated. "What exactly makes her incredible? The fact that she can't even stand on her own 2 feet." The words hit Zara like a slap, and for a moment she felt her whole body go cold. She looked down at the ground, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. She could feel the judgment in the air, thick and suffocating. How could she stand up against that? How could she fight back when the very people she had known her whole life were turning their backs on her? But then, something shifted. Marcus stepped forward, his voice firm and unwavering. "You do know Zara the way I do," he said. "She's more than her disability. She's a person who deserves respect, and I'm not going to let anyone talk down to her." Zara's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak to her that way. She had never heard anyone stand up for her like that. She had always been the one who had to fight for herself, who had to make people see her for who she truly was. But here was Marcus, a human, someone who had only just met her, standing up to her own people, defending her when she couldn't defend herself. The group of aliens remained silent for a moment, their expressions unreadable. But eventually they backed off, their disdain still evident in their eyes. They didn't say another word to Marcus, and they quickly turned and walked away, leaving Zara and Marcus standing there alone. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Zara couldn't believe what had just happened. She looked at Marcus, her heart pounding in her chest. You stood up for me," she said, her voice trembling. Marcus smiled at her, his eyes soft. "Of course I did. I'm not going to let anyone treat you that way, Zara." "You don't deserve it." Zara didn't know what to say. She had always thought that no one would ever care enough to defend her. She had always believed that she would be left to fight her battles alone. But here was Marcus, showing her that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face everything by herself. For the first time in a long time, Zara felt a sense of hope stirring in her chest. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Maybe there was someone who cared about her, someone who saw her for who she really was. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. The challenge came to an end and the winner was announced, but Zara didn't care. All that mattered was the feeling of warmth and security that Marcus had given her. He had stood up for her, and in that moment, she knew that no matter what anyone else thought, she had someone who would always be there for her. As the event ended and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus turned to Zara and smiled. "Let's go for a walk," he said. "I want to get away from all this noise." Zara nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the weight of her disability holding her back. She didn't feel the burden of judgment and isolation. With Marcus by her side, she felt like anything was possible. And as they walked away from the Grand Plaza, Zara couldn't help but smile. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where she belonged. Weeks passed, and Zara and Marcus's bond grew stronger. They had become an inseparable pair, navigating the complexities of life on Xanthias together. Though there were still moments of judgment from others, Zara was beginning to realize something important. She didn't need their approval. All she needed was to be true to herself, and with Marcus by her side, that was becoming easier to do. They spent countless hours exploring the many hidden corners of Xanthias. They ventured into quiet forests, where trees with silver leaves whispered secrets in the wind. They wandered through ancient ruins, touching the weathered stones of a civilization long forgotten. Zara showed Marcus the parts of Xanthias that few ever took the time to see, the places that weren't on display for visitors, but that had a beauty of their own. One evening, as they sat beneath the stars in a quiet meadow, Zara turned to Marcus, her heart full. "I never thought I'd be able to experience all of this," she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "Not just the beauty of this planet, but the beauty of being seen, of being understood." Marcus looked at her, his eyes soft and filled with warmth. "I think you're beautiful, Zara. You've taught me more than I could ever have imagined. Not just about Xanthias, but about life, about strength, about what really matters. I didn't expect to find someone like you when I came here." Zara's heart swelled with emotion. For so long, she had believed that her disability defined her, that it made her unworthy of love, of companionship. But Marcus had shown her that her worth wasn't tied to how her body worked or didn't work. Her worth came from who she was, her heart, her mind, and her kindness. Marcus had taught her that. "I never expected this either," Zara said, her voice trembling. "I never thought someone would see me like this. I always thought I was too different, too broken for anyone to care. But you've made me see that maybe I'm not broken after all." Marcus reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You're not broken, Zara. You're exactly as you're meant to be. You're strong in ways that others don't understand, but I see it. I see you." Zara looked down at their joined hands, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like an outsider. She didn't feel like she had to hide or pretend to be someone she was. With Marcus, she could just be herself, unapologetically. "Do you ever wonder what the future holds?" Zara asked, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Marcus smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I don't know what the future holds, Zara, but I know that I want to face it with you. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Zara felt a tear slip down her cheek, though she quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. "I never thought I'd have someone like you by my side," she whispered. "I've always been so alone, even when I was surrounded by people. But with you, I don't feel alone anymore." Marcus reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "You never have to be alone again, Zara, not while I'm here." Zara's heart fluttered at his words. She had never felt so safe, so cared for in her entire life. She had spent so many years hiding, afraid to let anyone in. But Marcus had shown her that it was okay to open up, to be vulnerable. And now, for the first time, she felt like she could truly be herself without fear. The days that followed were filled with joy and laughter. Marcus and Zara began to talk about the future, about what they wanted to do with their lives. They made plans, not just for the next few weeks, but for the years ahead. They talked about traveling together, exploring new planets, and building a life that was uniquely their own. But even as their future seemed brighter than ever, the world around them remained unchanged. The whispers and stares were still there, a constant reminder that not everyone was accepting of their bond. Zara had come to accept it, but there were still moments when the judgment of others weighed heavily on her. She knew that the world would never fully understand their connection, and maybe it never would. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she had Marcus, and he had her. One day, while walking through the marketplace, they encountered a familiar face. It was one of Zara's old friends, a fellow member of her species who had once been close to her. Zara hadn't seen her in months, not since the last time she had tried to fit in, to be part of a group. The alien woman who had once been kind to Zara looked at her now with a coldness in her eyes that made Zara's heart sink. "I see you're still with the human," the woman said, her tone sharp. "I never thought I'd see the day when you would lower yourself like this." Zara's stomach twisted. She had hoped that maybe things would be different now, that maybe some people would see the bond she shared with Marcus and accept it. But the woman's words stung, and Zara felt her confidence start to slip away. Marcus, however, didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his eyes steady and unwavering. "Zara is not lowering herself," he said calmly. "She's someone I respect, someone I care about, and I won't stand by while you insult her." The woman sneered, but Marcus's words seemed to make her hesitate. After a long pause, the woman turned and walked away, muttering something under her breath. Zara stood frozen for a moment, shocked by the interaction, but then she felt Marcus's hand gently touch her shoulder. "You see," he said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "You don't need their approval, Zara. You're stronger than that." Zara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Marcus's words settle within her. She had spent so much of her life trying to gain approval from others, trying to fit into a world that didn't understand her. But now, with Marcus by her side, she realized that her worth wasn't determined by the opinions of others. It was determined by who she was and who she chose to be. As the days passed, Zara began to hold her head a little higher. The whispers didn't bother her as much anymore. She no longer felt the need to hide, to shrink away from the world. She had found someone who saw her for who she truly was, someone who loved her, even when the world didn't. One evening, as they sat together beneath the stars, Marcus turned to Zara, a soft smile on his face. "Zara," he said, "I know this may sound sudden, but will you be my partner, not just here, not just now, but in the future? Will you walk beside me for the rest of our lives?" Zara's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. She had never expected this, never dreamed it would happen. But in that moment, as she looked into Marcus's eyes, she knew that this was the future she wanted, the future she had been waiting for. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "Yes, I will." And in that moment, Zara knew that no matter what challenges they faced, no matter what judgment or obstacles came their way, they would face it together. They were no longer two individuals living in separate worlds. They were partners, united in their love and their shared journey. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but with Marcus by her side, Zara felt ready for anything. Together, they would create a future that was theirs and theirs alone, a future where they were no longer defined by their differences, but by their strength, their love, and their unwavering bond.